Hello, readers. Welcome to Reading in the Middle, podcast dedicated to exploring the rich and diverse world of middle grade literature. I'm your host, Youth Services Librarian at the Cleveland Public Library, Anisha Jeffries, and today we have the distinct honor of speaking with Dr. Jewell Parker Rhodes. Dr. Rhodes is a New York Times bestselling author and esteemed educator, renowned for her compelling narratives that resonate with readers of all ages. Her acclaimed works, including Ghost Boys, Black Brother, and Paradise on Fire, tackle pressing social issues with depth and sensitivity. In her latest novel, Will's Race for Home, Dr. Rhodes transports us to the 1889 Oklahoma land rush. The story follows 12-year-old Will and his father as they journey from Texas to Oklahoma, driven by the promise of land ownership and a place to call home. Facing treacherous terrain, bandits, and the persuasive challenges of racism, their path is fraught with danger. Along the way, they encounter a mysterious ex-Union soldier named Caesar, whose presence adds complexity to their quest. This gripping adventure delves into the themes of resilience and hope and the pursuit of the American dream from an often underrepresented perspective. Beyond writing, Dr. Rhodes serves as the Virginia G. Piper Endowed Chair at Arizona State University and is the founding artistic director of the Virginia G. Piper Center for Creative Writing. Her dedication to fostering social justice, equity, and environmental stewardship shines through in both her educational and literary endeavors. Join me as I explore Dr. Rhodes' inspirations, her approach to addressing complex themes for young audiences, and the impact she hopes her stories will have on readers. Settle in, get ready, get your favorite bookish snack, and here we are with our episode with Dr. Jewell Parker Rhodes. Hi, Jewell. Welcome to Reading in the Middle.
It's my pleasure. Good to see you.
Thank you. I have a few questions for you. Your latest book, Will's Race for Home, takes readers back to the Oklahoma land rush, a moment in history that not many young readers may know about, but it's more than just a history lesson. It's an adventure. Can you tell us about Will's story and what made you want to write about this moment in history through his eyes?
I wanted to write about African Americans who, after emancipation, didn't go north, but went west. I actually hadn't known that. And so Will and his family is part of the community of African Americans who tried to make a land rush to Oklahoma because they were giving away a free set of 160 acres of land, but you had to be there at the starting line and you had to race to get it. So I also wanted to show how young boys in that era sort of grow up fast as men. And my Will meets the challenge, and he becomes later, as he's older in my imagination, the entrepreneur who helps create Black communities in Oklahoma. There are over 30 Black communities that still exist today in Oklahoma from the 1800s, including an 1800 Black rodeo show that is still going strong. But I also imagined that Will might have been one of the young entrepreneurs in 1889 who, when he grew up, built Deep Greenwood. And then Deep Greenwood, was massacred. And I'd also written about that as an adult. So it's also about the life of young and old, everybody that's Black, in some sense, keep having that resilience and that strength to battle the racism and have to have the to press forward to their dream despite a hostile environment and at times a hostile society. So Will is my hero. Every Black person that's walking this earth.
Will is my hero too, as well. The book is also about a family's journey to claim their own land and build a future. What do you hope readers take away from Will's experience?
Well, when I speak to school children, we do a call and response. And I said, I want you to, imagine your will. And when I write, I sort of focus on what my characters desire. So I'll shout, I want, and then the kids will answer home. I want, and the kids answer freedom. I want, yes, happiness. And those call and response remarks are what every human being wants, what every human being deserves. And so being willing to fight for that, to be determined for that is what I want kids to remind themselves that if you want something bad enough, boom, freedom, joy, you can make it happen. But also one of the neat things is that I like Westerns. I did when I was a kid. And I didn't know that as a kid, all the repressiveness against Native people, the way that it was whitewashed, I didn't know all of that. But I just loved the idea that there would be a world, particularly someone who was like a gunslinger, someone with power in the skill to use a pistol, could in fact put it to good use. So the movies I liked the best were the ones of the gunslingers who were protecting community, helping people who were poor and disenfranchised. So in my novel, I have a character named Caesar. He picked up the gun after he escaped slavery to become a Union officer. So that's a praise song to fought literally for the freedom of their own people. And he decides to join his family and he's going to help them find home. But because he's a Union soldier and they're trapped in old Confederate land, Texas was Confederate. We know about Juneteenth. Oklahoma was. So every time somewhere people come back and want to keep fighting the Civil War. So eventually he helps the family, but he's got to go because some people let the war go in their minds. And now he's become more of a handicap rather than helping the family. So it is complicated by the idea that in some ways the Civil War never has ended. That's part of the novel too. And Will has to make the decision that I'm not going to be like Caesar and I'm not going to be sharecropper like my dad. Right. Be a homeowner and I'm going to raise order. I'm going to fulfill my dream.
It's so inspirational. Will is my hero. And while reading the book, I noticed there's a lot of action in the story. What was your favorite scene to write?
Oh, my goodness. Well, there is a lot of action. And Will just thinks he's going to have an adventure. And he's like, have an adventure. And the very first night, they've been traveling all day. And Will's friend, Belle, who is the mule, has been pulling that wagon and working hard. But she gets attacked by a snake. And Will's woken up and knows love Belle the mule, but if they lose Belle, they'll never ever make the journey. So he has to battle this poisonous snake, and that was a favorite scene, But also a favorite scene is that when Caesar decides, I'm going to put all these people who are ex-Confederates, I'm going to make them stop interfering with this family's flight, go up and have the showdown in town, right? And you're not fighting fair. And it's Will who says, ambush. Will, who actually has to help save Caesar's life and really battle off with bandit thieves and, all the people who, aren't your friend. He learns, and for a young man to learn that not everybody's your friend, and then learn why they might not be your friend simply because the color of your skin is a sobering experience. And he meets that challenge, but he also often saves the adults, saves Belle, and in saving he saves himself because he grows up into a fine young man.
Yes, yes, yes. And I just really want to congratulate you on the book being a New York Times bestseller. It's absolutely fantastic. And listeners, you have to read this book. There's many other books that Jewell has written, but this one right now, it just came out. It came out in January, correct?
For January 14th.
Yes.
Thank you for saying that, Anisha. This book is a little bit different. I usually have, boys and girls in my novels because I'm the mother to a son and a daughter.
Mm-hmm.
But this book, I think because of time, became focused on these three men, Will, the growing young man, and Caesar and Will's father.
Yes.
And it really is about the bonding between men, and really a love that I think, girls always love everything because girls love stories and girls are great readers. But I thought particularly of the boys who don't necessarily see themselves in books, would see a healthy picture of a whole family of men, learning, teaching, loving, being loyal to one another, fighting and saving each other's lives together.
Yes.
The power of that. And it also fits in, I think, with this concept of war. The Civil War was, in fact, a male-dominated war. And when I was writing about Magic City in the 1920s and the massacre of that too was male-dominated. Male-dominated by Black soldiers who had come home from World War I, knew what it was like to fight for home, freedom, and joy. And when one of their own was, captured and they were to try to hang them, these men came together and said, oh no, we're going to have due process. And apparently that started the race riot. So the image of Black men after Civil War, World War I, just the idea that they fight for the common good, fight for their community, is so threatening to some groups of people. And I wanted to show the beauty.
And you have. And one of the things that I absolutely love about your books is that they tackle really important topics: racism, social justice, history, without even talking down to kids. You trust readers to think deeply and ask questions. So how do you decide what stories to tell?
Oh, Anisha, that's such a great question. Thank you. And thank you for understanding my work. That means the world to me. I couldn't write if I didn't have readers like you, if I didn't have readers like young students who sort of who get it and are really the best. But most of my stories just come from, I might read, an article, or I might experience the wildfires in California. My very first youth novel came because I'd written 4 adult novels about Louisiana. I love Louisiana and Marie Laveau, and so when Katrina happened, I knew those people. I knew that community. I woke up from a dream, and the first 2 pages of Ninth Ward, they were exactly as I dreamt them, and they came out perfectly, and I didn't touch them. So there was a connection that I had in terms of experience. For the Tulsa Race Massacre, I read a newspaper clipping, I experienced 9/11, wrote Towers Falling. So usually they have some place inside my heart. And when I write, I don't outline. I don't, know exactly what's going to happen. I might know in Bayou Magic that there are going to be mermaids. Yeah, black mermaids. Ooh, and the people still, but I don't know how the characters are going to. So I call it dramatic fiction. I imagine that I'm these people. I dream that I'm these characters, and I write from what would I do next? What would I do next? And sometimes I even get surprised. My process is very strange, and my husband tells me that I dream stories in my sleep, and sometimes I talk about out loud about Johnny goes out the window and he's being chased by, so I don't know. Stories are just part of my life, but I know in particular the story has to grip my soul. But there are 2 stories that I was asked to write them, And out of 20 books, they were the only 2 stories that I was asked to write that I agreed to write. One was about 9/11. And most people don't realize that 9/11 is still not taught in schools. The adults were so traumatized that we still can't somehow deal with it as we should. And particularly when I was writing 15 years after 9/11. And I really felt as though children who didn't live that experience to know how to process it. And I came up with the idea that in a 5th grade classroom, teachers teaching, interdisciplinarily, 9/11. And I feature a Muslim American girl, a Jewish boy whose father has PTSD from serving in the war, but the heroine is an African American girl. And that's my nod to all the people of color that were lost this hour's falling. And her family, Renisha's family, is homeless. And a lot of people have a stereotype that anybody who is homeless because they don't work hard. Well, 9/11 made so many homeless people simply because the biggest cause of homelessness is mental health care. And so she has to discover that her dad, traumatized by being a hero at 9/11, by having the trauma of 9/11, basically has his own PTSD. So I wanted to make it front and center that there were a lot of communities that were affected. So I'm proud that I wrote that.
Me
but
too.
Ghost Boys, perhaps my most worldwide famous book about the death of Emmett Till, and he was murdered when I was a little girl, and I still have been haunted by images of Emmett Till. And then, the death of Tamir Rice, Trayvon Martin, so many others, moving up to the elders of George Floyd, and the young teenagers, Laquan McDonald. And I was asked to write about the murder of young Black boys, and I told my editor she was crazy. I was not going to do it. And actually, because I've experienced that kind of racism via my son and how the world sees him, and because I've been waiting so long to be a young adult writer or write for children, and I've been practicing my craft, I thought, if I don't do it, who will? Or, yes, it's going to be hard, but Jewell, you like hard things. So why don't you just give it a try? And my editor, we agreed that if it didn't come out right, we would never publish it. I will not publish anything just to collect a paycheck. I publish only what I think is my best, because our children deserve that. And so I gave it a try, and it was a long, long journey and very painful. I would write a little bit and cry a little bit, then have to go rest for like 6 weeks and then go back. And my first draft, 6 pages long, and I said, that's it, I'm done. And my editor, well, isn't it a little short? And I went, and I had to go back to it. But that book, I thought afterwards, when I was done, that I had succeeded in showing in an age-appropriate way the injustice of stereotyping young Black men. And I felt it had taken such a toll on me that I would never, ever write another book again, ever. That was it. I had given it all. And I had made my peace with that. And I didn't write for a year. And then I started getting letters from children all over the world who told me that they needed that space to talk about racism. They needed that understanding, that they needed, to just tell them, didn't even know about Emmett Till. Many didn't even adults about Emmett Till. They didn't know this history. Power of the African American community to also believe that every goodbye ain't gone, that the dead are with us, and that the dead also rise above their victimhood by having a purpose to educate. We just have to listen to them. So listen to the voices of Tamir Rice, Trayvon Martin, Emmett Till, we've got to stop this madness. And so the idea that the next generation can stop the madness of racism, we've got to keep believing. So I'm very proud of Ghost Boys, proud that I did it. It was a very strange journey for me.
I'm very happy that you received letters from young people asking you or letting you know that, that the impact that your books have had on them, particularly Ghost Boys, because it's you had to take a couple of breaks writing in between when you were writing Ghost Boys. While writing, did you ever worry about whether a topic is too much for young readers?
I didn't, that's a great question. And I think in a way that I'm blessed because I started as an adult writer. I started as a young person writing, searching for my own history and trying to understand what are all the things that made me as a woman of color. And I think that journey is universal, and children still have that desire and need too. So I'm gonna give it to them, and I'm gonna give it to them straight. But I'm gonna give them that history, that understanding, but also not strip away hope or their affirmation. I have found that I agency by knowing more about my ancestors and knowing more about our history. So all of my books are designed for the young person to find their own agency. And if you find that, no matter what you hear or what you learn, you're going to be able to make it through because you are not victimizing yourself. You are, in fact, asserting your identity. And I wrote Ghost Boys to have young men, and I've met young men who say, I didn't know that this was a pattern, I thought it was because of me. A ghost boy lives here. No, baby, you're beautiful. And if people are seeing your beauty, it's something that's wrong with them that goes all the way back to that first decision to enslave people. But a color is no more special than somebody's tall or short or has, brown eyes or blue eyes or long fingers or stumpy fingers. It's just a superficial difference. And I actually wrote Black Brother as a kind of companion to Ghost Boys, talking about how you have the school to prisons pipeline. So a lot of people of color, if you aren't, being, attacked or murdered or brutalized for a skin tone, very often they are, put in juvie, taken out of their schools, falsely accused, and then that makes it more likely they're going to end up being kids who don't graduate from high school, who end up being actually in the criminal justice system. So it's a horrific pattern. And so a child has to be able to say, I am beautiful. I love myself. The problem is not me. It's this world and how people see me. And it doesn't mean you turn into revenge. You can have compassion and empathy and forgiveness. You're standing on your own 2 feet, secure that you as a young person of color are just fine, just glorious, just wonderful. I've had the experience where teachers have told me that young men who don't read books, that the only book that they have ever read from start to finish is Ghost Boys. And in fact, if you look at Black Brother, it's dedicated to a young man in Wisconsin who, as an 8th grader, Ghost Boys was the only book that he had ever read from start to finish. And so I especially love the kids who aren't readers because society would also not make you a reader. And so because my books are not patronizing, because they're written from the oral tradition, so it's like grandma on porch, what's going on? The dialogue, monologue, and the folk, that they can hear it, and it concerns things that are vital and important to their lives. And so basically it can be the content and the style of telling it, just like Toni Morris and Alice Walker, their style of telling it. So I'm trying to bring an authentic African-American oral tradition style with, a multi-ethnic but primary historical focus on African-American content to kids. And they're eating it up. Yes, they can read, but they have to be motivated by something that interests them. So I'm very proud that boys supposedly who don't read will read my books, and girls, they read everything.
Yes.
That actually is a stereotype, and forgive me for using that. It's just that I have had a lot of experience for women's book groups and Go On Girls, all the book clubs that women create. But actually next Saturday, I'm going to be talking to a group of men, a men's book club. I think that it's there is some truth in this idea that lots of women read and boys don't. But again, I think it's not because of the people themselves. It's because of the way systemically our society does not engender stories of interest to boys. The fact that the majority of our teachers are also women and they're picking stories. So for a long time, that's why in my stories, I have a boy and a girl. Sometimes a boy will take the lead and we'll have a co-protagonist, but sometimes like Paradise on Fire, it's a Dago, an African-American girl who shows that I can survive. I can do this, So I am in general saying this is an inclusive world for boys and girls and trying to break that wall that creates the stereotype, which has resulted, in fact, sometimes that more girls and women read books than men. But men, hey, I love you, young boys. I love you. I love everybody. And I'm writing for all of you.
And that's one of the wonderful things about your books, Jewell, is that you write for everyone. And you had mentioned just a few minutes ago about stereotyping. I don't believe that. I work in a library and I see a lot of our young ladies, always getting the books that they love to read. But also for young boys, what you're doing and other authors, middle grade authors are doing, are writing for books that interest them. If there's nothing that interests them, they won't read it. They have to be interesting and engaging. And your books do that. So have you ever had a young reader, has a reader ever told you about a book about one of your books that made you see it in a whole new way?
Oh, well, it is true for Ghost Boys when the young man said when he thought there was something wrong with him for being Black. That's why he was mistreated and had received negative looks. That revelation that, where did you get that from? No.
Right.
I mean, that sense of how sometimes even parents who wouldn't want their children to think that way don't really know what they're thinking, So the fact that he felt comfortable enough to say this to me was an enormous gift, an enormous breakthrough. Also, in terms of boys and girls, grandmothers who raised them. That sometimes there are elders and grandmother figures in my novels. And I remember one young man who in Minnesota came out and said, I'm being raised by my grandma. And I said, yeah, and so was I. And isn't it great that we have these grandmothers who give us love? Not that we should insist that they do it and they should have their own lives too. But if my grandmother hadn't stopped to raise me, I would not be who I am. So I'm sorry that she had the burden of all these young ones to take care of. But I am ever so grateful that she stepped up and changed the course of the generations for the future. So that selflessness has been part of our community, that to see young people realize that that's what's going on in their own homes now today, a kind of grace, long history. To me, that's always really interesting and surprising. And then when they learn too about, in white society, we talk about, people talk about, ghosts being negative. And in my world, there are lots of spirits and ghosts. My grandmother was a hoodoo lady, and and playing the numbers and dreams.
Yes.
So to me, it's very natural and authentic to put it in my books. Or as Toni Morrison once said, this isn't magic or magical realism. That's, something else. This is just Black folk. This is just our culture. And to remind kids, I say, did your grandmother ever give you castor oil? Or did somebody, talk to you about your dreams? Or even when somebody has died, they'll say that the distance between the living and the dead is very thin, and that your ancestors are still with you. And so my books bring all of that up. The reminder that we have a spiritual history that does in fact descend from Africa. And in fact, you can provide evidence, and I found this as an adult novelist writing about, voodoo and hoodoo, that wherever slaves landed, they were not a blank slate. While many of them became Christian, they just blended it in with their African-based spirituality. And particularly Catholicism had echoes in terms of, but the idea of using music to call the spirits, to having that sense of the Holy Ghost, or that you don't need a intermediary to access God, that you can just talk to, God, and whether your spiritual system can be very fluid. But one of the things African diaspora is that it allows for that. People don't have to be perfect. We are in fact imperfect, but everything, whether it's alive, dead, or like a piece of wood, is deserving of respect. And if you think about it, if we treated everything in this world as worthy as respect, what a good world we would have. So it's like my grandmother would say, "Jewel, child, all things alive." And if you walk out in your world and think of everything being alive and wanting to treat it as you want to be treated, you're not going to do any evil. You're just going to do good. Or grandma would say, "Jewel, child, do good," and it'll fly right back to you. And so I think all those voices that maybe grandparents and some parents still say today, or a teacher might say, in ways that have a common sense, spiritual, African-American rootedness that I think young people feel called to, and recognize it's not a stereotype, even though you've lived in a culture that has tried to stereotype your faith, tried to stereotype your community. I am writing serious award-winning literature that has these elements because these are cultural treasures.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And a sense of community is so important. And it runs through your books, community, family. When you were mentioning about like grandparents, it's so important to pass on history, and grandparents and family, they do that with young people. They oral history, talking about the family and what happened prior to the children coming into the family, and how I'll give an example: the Great Migration. That is such an important part of the Black American history, and I say that because of everyone that I speak to. They have a story about family moving from the South, coming to the North, and that sense of community is so is such a bonding experience, right?
Yes.
Right.
And will remind us, we have a lot of family and community that went to the West.
Yes.
We underrepresented, but I think, Anisha, you are so wise, but there is a power when you see your culture in a book, because we're taught, you go to school, these things are important. So when I was growing up and when I went to college for 8 years to get my doctorate, I was never given in a course a book by a person of color. Librarians and school teachers gave me books. So I was the Dick and Jane era, and Dick and Jane had their little dog named Spot. That's why I have a Spot in Ninth Ward. But Spot is a nice laugh. And I didn't know that Black people wrote books until I was a junior in college. And I stumbled upon Gail Jones's Corregidora, and it was like a revelation to me. And then I had children, right? And I was trying to become a children's author by writing for 30 years for adults to honor my craft and own my craft, But my children went to school, and they were given one book by a Black woman for Martin Luther King's Day in 5th grade. It was Mildred Taylor's Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. 3 years later, my son came along. He got the same book, Mildred Taylor's Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry, and that's a fabulous book, but that is all they got. This age is a little bit of a renaissance because children have more diverse books. There are more writers of color who have broken through into the publishing world. Still not enough. We're still a small percentage. And then you can be it's the problem that in writing about Frederick Douglass, and one day we can talk about, because I've written adult novels about Frederick Douglass and his white mistress and his Black wife. So I got a long history. I'm an elder. I know a lot of stuff.
Yes, you do.
declaring, that reading freed him. What did he read? He read white Western tradition. So if you go through his narratives very carefully, the images and metaphors that he uses and the way that he shapes the story is based on the white Western traditions that he read. Here's a simple example. In Western American literature, what became American literature was this focus on a white man who says, I did it my way. I went and conquered these native people. I went and conquered this land. I did it all by myself. And there actually is a thread of that in Frederick Douglass's narrative. I did it all by myself, When in fact, I'm writing about these two women. If he didn't have their help, he might not have gotten as far as he did, Or he made mistakes because he didn't listen to these two women. Yes. Now, they go up to today. There's a favorite writer that I have, Gary Paulson.
Yes.
And he died. And Gary Paulson wrote a book called Hatchet, a young white boy who's in a plane above Alaska. The pilot dies, he crashes, and he has to figure out how to survive with just a hatchet. And it's a wonderful story, and the audiobook is even better. And me and my children loved all these stories about Brian. There were 5 books. But each time it's about a white boy or a boy doing it his way, all by myself. Okay? So that's a pattern that's white master narrative, right? That's what you read. In Paradise on Fire, Adago, my African-American girl, she has to survive too. And she shows that she can outwidow a wildfire because she has a gift of topography and cartography, and that she can actually see intuitively like an eagle. And that's what her name means, Adago, eagle, that she can see. And so she helps her friends escape. And at one point, they can't go any further. And she is the one that has to go out on her own and find the rescuers to go back and help her friends, her community. So I know from my African American community, no way that, we're going to leave family behind. No way we're going to leave friends. So even there, I'm writing, an African American as well as a womanist tradition that, yes, you can survive. It's like Harriet Tubman. Harriet's going to say, come with me, but there is that strain that in teaching children's literature that in Western culture, it's usually a young man who does it all by himself, not exclusively, but generally. And so I'm not going to write that book because that's not what my culture and what my womanist tradition tells me to be true. So it's important for our kids to read that, and in reading it, they feel that different power, that makes, do you know what I mean? That brings it home in a way that's culturally authentic. And that's what I'm really trying to do. And then I'm trying to give teachers and librarians books that they have hard discussions with their kids, or parents can have hard discussions, and the kids will come back, read it again and again and again, that I'm trying to give the literature that literally it's worth reading over and over and over again. Because after you read it the third time, you get something that you didn't get the first time. I'm really trying to write high quality. And my greatest legacy, I think, is to have my books live in a classroom. So there never will be, like even my generation or my children's generation, where all they ever read is 1 or 2 books or no books by people of color.
Your books, when you're saying they will live in the classrooms and in the libraries, we have all of your books. And they're always checked out. Always being checked out. So just know that I see young people checking your books out, taking your books, parents recommending them, and I just wanted to let you know that if that your books are loved and they're being read.
Thank you. That warms my heart, Anisha. And one of the things I would do, shout out to kids and to parents and to teachers and librarians. If you notice, every book I write is different, really different,
Yes.
I generally don't write sequels, so I am going to write one now. But even when I wrote Black Brother about colorism, it's also a sports about fencing and how Alexander Dumas was a great black fencer and his dad was a great general of Napoleon. How come we didn't know that? We thought the Three Musketeers were all white. You know what I mean? But it's so funny. But the reason why, there's so much that in our history that I want to share. But it's also, I tell students and parents, if you don't like one book, read another, because they're all different. And I think that I'm also trying to just tell kids, if you can imagine it, you can make it so. Mm-hmm. So I've never sort of outdoors person in my life. I can't even swim still, but probably maybe either, who knows? But in Paradise on Fire, she still learns how to cross that river and how to take care of herself, and she does it. Or, that this young black man who actually had never fenced a day in his life actually finds out that he's really good at it and that he doesn't have to be a tall basketball player. The reason why there's a lot of basketball players is because ball sports were cheaper for children of color who might also be poor. But certain sports like, skiing, fencing, water polo, horse polo are very expensive. So they get this notion of the aristocratic community. But that doesn't mean that there aren't kids of color who would be geniuses at those sports if they had access. And one of the things about the fencing world right now is that it is more of color than it has ever been in a lifetime. And that's a shout out to Peter Westbrook, who became a national black champion decades and decades ago, who opened up a studio in Harlem where he made fencing free. So the Rio and the Chinese fencing teams were more multi-ethnic than they have ever been. So even Irabaji Muhammad, a Muslim woman who won bronze in saber, and I have a Muslim girl who's a fencer in my book too. She came through his studio. People who went on to win gold came through his studio. So literally he changed the fencing and its access for all kinds of young people of color who have shown that they can excel. So it's also then a shout out that it should not be that we allow money to determine what sports, what interests, what things our kids get exposed to. That society owes all children an equal chance and equal opportunity. And so my books also then bring out other things that you can think about. Because in particular, you can get scholarships to college. I know so many young people who go to college on fencing scholarships because it's not a very widely known sport, and then go on and travel, see the world. And one example is a kind of nephew-in-law who went and became a world champion, and now he's a coach at a major university, coaching other people. How
nice!
So I just like to show more things you can think of to do. Scuba diving, or that kind of stuff. So I like that. We can do it. If we see it, we can do it. So my books are opening up the world that is seen, I hope, somewhat, not only of their own cult, but also of opportunities for children. But if you don't like writing a book, read another, because it's going to be about something else. It'll be similar, but still very, very different.
Yes, and you made me think of, when you said scuba diving, I did read, or I think I've seen a video of African-American scuba divers. I can't recall it right now, but it's an organization that promotes that for, African-Americans that want to scuba dive.
And I know exactly, yes.
And isn't that amazing? I mean, so something like that is obtainable. That's it.
Yeah, I was going to say, Anishi, yes, because I was getting so excited. So I'm sorry to talk over you. But I know that talking about, and also there's a group down in the Caribbean and southern United States of Diving with a Purpose that's also into the sort of archaeology of looking for slave ships underwater. And actually, which is another a story that what we call the Magical Isle is going to be set in New Orleans, and it could be set also with scuba diving and all that kind of stuff. But there's also another African American group that has banded together to climb, the great mountain in Nepal. No, that's not Kilimanjaro's in Uganda. I'm just blanking out because I'm tired. The big peak that everybody the climb that so many people die upon.
Mount Everest. Mount Everest.
Yes, yeah. I did say that, and then I thought, no, that's not right. But there's that or the black people in birding. So it's like everything is fair game, and there's so much in this world that bring you joy, and so it's like I want to mirror also that opportunity back, as well as your culture. And there's nothing that because of your culture that you're supposedly not allowed to do. Not in a just world. You can do anything you want to do. And so that's what my characters discover. And actually, if one day if I write a book, because like Virginia Hamilton's A People Could Fly, where she talks about African Americans who like they shed their wings because they became enslaved. And then finally, when some of them couldn't take it anymore, they asked their conjurer, Toby, to whisper their real name, not the name that they've been given as a slave, but their real name. Gain their power, and they fly on back to Africa. That novel, as an adult, touched my heart so much. And then when I saw Toni Morrison use that as an image in Song of Solomon, when at the very end, the characters as adults fly towards one another. And she doesn't let you know whether they succeed and really fly or not. But in my world, I think she's telling me, no, I want you to imagine them flying. So I want to be able to write books where it shows Black people flying, and you're going to believe because it's part of our tradition and superpower. So that's really what I'm trying to give kids. And maybe I should write that as a book. I do.
Yes.
Maybe that book where I can fly, and it's not because I got bit or like a Spider-Man by a bug, or I'm a Marvel character, but I can fly because didn't you know Black folks have always historically, folktale-wise, myth-wise, oral tradition-wise, have had a legacy being able to fly.
Yes.
So much.
That would be wonderful if you did that, please. Yes. It sure is.
That's what I mean about taking a sort of master narrative, a white tradition narrative, and then shaping it according to the narrative style of my culture and the narrative content of my culture of today's world to make it different. And I think there are ways in which it would still work because stories are so ancient, and there's something ancient in all of us, humanity, that says, I want to believe, that keeps saying over and over again, tell me a story.
Yes. And stories are so important of building those relationships and bonding and passing those down to generations and generations. That's the power of stories. And you have the power of storytelling. You just do.
I almost lost it too, because I wasn't going to be a writer because I never saw Black people who wrote books, So sometimes I just think of what a blessing and a strange coincidence. I was studying theater. I had seen, on TV, Blacks were good at sports or they could be good at entertainment. And so I was going to be, I was an actress, singer, dancer. And I went to Carnegie Mellon University to study theater, which now we have people like, Leslie Odom Jr. who went there, and so many other great stars. And it's had a wonderful tradition. And I'm still involved very much with Carnegie Mellon University. It was wonderful. And I think they were the ones who dramatic fiction writing than to imagine myself the character. But it was when I saw that book in the library that I all of a sudden said, that's what I'm meant to be, a writer. And I almost missed it. And then by the time August started writing his plays, and I great admire his, and it was sort of like, oh darn, I wish I'd had them sooner, because I just had a few that I knew about, and of course Raisin in the Sun. But if I had known about him, maybe then I would have been a playwright. And if I was starting all over, I think I would have now be a screenwriter. So again, it's like this whole idea of seeing it and as a writer, for now theater, screenwriting, and also if you talk about music and the narrative of music and hip hop, and all this kind of stuff, they're coming into a new renaissance of creativity. So we need to value that and not let it be lost. And that's why I always try to do my very best to make sure that it remains, just like some of the great works of the Harlem Renaissance still echo and remain across time.
Oh, and that's how your books will be. They will. They remain that way. Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Oh, yes. Jewell, now it's time for our lightning round questions. So I'll ask you a question, and whatever comes to your mind, whatever pops into your mind, you just answer that, okay? Are you ready?
Okay. Yes.
Okay. What's a book you loved as a kid and it still sticks with you? It could be anything.
Actually, it was a comic book.
Okay.
And I actually appreciate graphic novels. And Ghost Boys is coming out as a graphic novel. We didn't have a lot of money in next fall. Yeah, we didn't have a lot of money to buy books. And so I would collect pop bottles and I would get a nickel for them. And I'd go to the grocery store, the little corner store, and I would buy comic books. And I'd buy, Betty and Veronica and all those Jughead, all those silly books. But I also bought the classic illustrated stories where they would tell Mark Twain's The Prince and the Pauper, or they would tell King Arthur and his knights, or Prince Valiant, that they would tell these or Robin Hood or Treasure Island, classic stories. And in particular, I loved Prince Valiant. And I didn't know how much of an impact it had on me when I was sort of like in elementary school until one day when I was about maybe 28 years old and I'm with my husband-to-be and we're sitting in the car and we're having Dunkin' Donuts and coffee. And he says to me, Jewell, what do you want to be when you grow up? Right? And of course, I'm never going to grow up. I like being young. I immediately just said, valiant. I want to be valiant. And then all of a sudden, all the images of Prince Valiant, of being loyal and being true, of being kind, of fighting against injustice, of helping those who are weaker, just flooded back into my mind. So it's not a Black tradition book because I didn't have access in there and I didn't know where those things were, if they even existed. But it was a comic book that I think resonated with the values of what my community teaching me how to live nonetheless. A very pure sense of kindness and empathy.
Yes.
To me, that also connects, I'm teaching Brian Stevenson's Just Mercy, which is a fabulous book. If you haven't read that, you must read it.
Oh, I've read it.
Again,
yeah,
it's fabulous.
Yes.
And when he talks about, forgiveness, or the man who's been on death row and he has forgiveness and empathy. And my students are always wondering, where does that come from? Where does that come from? And it comes from a real pure sense of humanity. And yes, Prince Valiant had that, but also that's what kept, I think, the Black community also alive, because you can eat yourself up with anger and hatred. You can destroy yourself, but in order to thrive and survive, or to keep your spirit whole, you have to believe in love, loyalty, kindness, empathy, compassion, helping the weak, using your strengths to right injustices. And strangely enough, that was what the Great Round Table and Prince Valiant were all about. So that meant a lot to me when I was growing up.
Awesome. If there was one book that you could have turned into a movie, what scene would you love to see on the big screen or on TV?
Or on TV. My very first novel, Voodoo Dreams, which many times people have tried to make it into a movie or started making it into a movie or optioned it for a movie, but it still has never yet quite been made, but maybe one day it will. But there is a scene where Marie Laveau, who was a hoodoo, voodoo, spiritual woman in a time of slavery for most Black people, walks across Lake Pontchartrain, very much like the Christ vision of walking across the waters. There's actually a newspaper article. Now, we know everything that's written in the newspaper is supposed to be true, but there's actually a newspaper article that actually says, this happened, But you've got to read the book, because where is truth? And I love playing with that. But in terms of the book big screen, there was a time when Whoopi Goldberg and Steve Tisch were interested in making it a movie about 40 years ago. And I did have this image. Wouldn't it be wonderful to show Black women who could make miracles, that women who could make miracles, and to have this where Whoopi, or this Black woman, rises from the water and walks. I would love that. There is like that on it's on Ghostwriters. It's an Apple TV. I think it might have been connected to the Sesame Street producing organization, where they did 2 episodes at the end of season 2 about my Bayou Magic novel, and they talk about Mama Wata, who is a Black mermaid, and Black mermaids presumably came with slaves as they were coming across to America, and they've remained in American as well as South American waters to keep watch over the descendants of their children. And they are shows, and one was held at the Smithsonian, where it shows Black mermaids of all ranges of colors, rising from the water. And I think if you go to my website, jewellparkerrhodes.com, there's a little clip where it shows this Black woman, Black mermaid, sparkling with jewels and glory and beauty and blackness, rising the water. And I had a gentleman say to me, that is the first time I've ever seen that image of a powerful Black woman rising, being spiritually strong, rebirthing herself, ready to save the world out of the water on television or movies or film in my entire life. So I guess that image of water and the power of water with the power of womanhood means a lot to me.
I want to watch that. So you said it's Ghostwriter. It's on Apple TV. It's on season 2 episode.
Yes, and I double check to make sure that I'm right, and actually, make sure that I can provide you with a link to the clip, because it is truly beautiful.
Oh, awesome! So, Jewell, you mentioned that that Ghost Boys will be a graphic novel, but do you have anything next that's coming besides Ghost Boy being into a graphic novel?
Yes, this the novel Magical Isles, set in the waters in and around the Caribbean in New Orleans, and set in New Orleans. That's going to continue the Treasure Island Runaway Gold, where again the Black children discover a treasure of heritage as well as of money. And in Treasure Island Runaway Gold, they do it in the subway systems on skateboards, and have skateboard duels, and there's the pirates who are like more contemporized, and they discover the up northern burial ground for northern Black slaves, which a lot of people want to deny. But right now there's an African American that is a public park in New York that honors literally the Black people who built Wall Street. And Wall Street was called Wall Street because they had a wall where they sold Black people. But the church, Trinity Church, which was built with Black people, is still there. Some of the buildings where we now have some of the great, capitalistic, banks, they were built by former slaves and free people of color. So I'm now going to take those characters, and we're going to go to New Orleans and the water and do another kind of story. And I'm going to include, because I love animals, hip hop, the Jack Russell Terrier, who is a kind of wonderful sidekick. So that's next.
I cannot wait. That is exciting. I'm so excited about that. So thank you for sharing. So what do you hope kids feel when they close the last page of one of your books?
I hope they feel enlightened, that, I didn't know that they learned something. But I most importantly hope that they felt something, that the journey of my hero, male or female, means something. them, and they see themselves as, I could be like that. This is a mirror. I am filled with my own power, my own self-love. I can do that, and then they go on to write their own stories. They live their own stories.
That's some great advice. I like hearing that. Thank you for sharing that. Oh, Jewell, this has been such a fantastic conversation. Thank you for sharing your time, your wisdom, your stories with me. And before we go, can you let our listeners know where to find you and to follow your work?
Well, you can look at www.jewellparkerrhodes.com. There's a website that divides for adults as well as one that divides into for youth. I am on Instagram and Facebook and Blue Sky, but sometimes I'm not as responsive as I could be, and I apologize for that because it's like, it's still hard to find time to write, because I'm a mom,
right?
I'm a teacher. I'm a dog mom to 4-legged animals and 2-legged people and a wife. But I will always do my best to get back to you, and never ever doubt that I don't want to hear from you. And if you just absolutely need to, reach out to Jewell Parker Rhodes with 2 L's and 2 R's at gmail.com, and I'll get to you as soon as I can.
You got back with me as soon as you could. So, yes. So thank you. Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate all of this wonderful conversation that we had together. And I just want to thank you. Okay. Thank you.
I thank you, and I appreciate you. And keep on doing what you're doing. You're a first, too. I mean, a new brave group of people who are making, podcasts and material for our youth and the parents of our youth, and the teachers and librarians and all those who are invested in the literacy of our youth. So thank you very much. Thank you for shining the light.
Oh, my pleasure.
Cool.
And that wraps up another episode of Reading in the Middle. I extend my heartfelt gratitude to Dr. Jewell Parker Rhodes for sharing her insights and experiences with me today. For more information about Dr. Rhodes and her extensive body of work, visit her official website at jewellparkerrhodes.com. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and share this episode with others who may be interested. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Also, feel free to let us know which topics you'd like for us to cover in future episodes by reaching out in the comments or on our social media channels. Stay tuned for more conversations with authors and illustrators who continue to shape and enrich the landscape of middle grade literature. Until next time, keep reading, keep exploring, and keep celebrating the magic of middle grade books. Bye.